I remember the first time I tried to watch an English movie, it felt like everyone was speaking too fast, and I couldn't understand a word. Frustration started to sink in. But I didn't give up. Slowly, I found ways to make sense of the words, using subtitles, rewatching scenes, and focusing on how characters spoke. That's when movies became more than just entertainment. They became my path to learning English. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's video. I'm going to take you on a journey through my personal experience of how I learned English by watching movies. It wasn't easy at first, but it turned out to be one of the most rewarding parts of my language learning process. And today, I'll share the exact steps I followed, along with some practical tips, so you can use movies to improve your English too. When I first started, it was impossible to follow along without subtitles. I would watch movies like The Avengers or Harry Potter, and while I was fascinated by the action and the story, I couldn't keep up with the dialogue. Everything just moved so fast. That's when I realized I needed help from subtitles. So, in the beginning, I watched movies with subtitles in my own language. This allowed me to understand the plot while still being exposed to English sounds and phrases. It was a good starting point. But as I got more comfortable, I switched to English subtitles. Let me tell you, this was a game changer. Suddenly, I could connect the spoken words with their written form. I started recognizing phrases like "what's going on?" or "are you serious?" common expressions used in everyday English. Watching with English subtitles forced me to read and listen at the same time, helping me get familiar with sentence structure and pronunciation. One of the best strategies I discovered was rewatching movies I already loved. The first time you watch a movie, you're usually focused on the plot. But when you rewatch it, you start to notice the language more. For me, one of the movies I rewatched over and over again was The Lion King. At first, I barely understood anything in English, but as I watched it again and again, I became more familiar with the dialogue. Since I already knew the story, I could focus entirely on the language. The magic of rewatching is that you're not distracted by trying to figure out what's happening. Instead, you can zero in on how things are being said, the accents, the tone of voice, and the specific phrases the characters use. Over time, I could quote lines from the movie and even mimic the way the characters spoke. It was a huge confidence booster. I also realized that watching entire movies was exhausting when you're learning a language. It's easy to lose focus after an hour or so, and the experience can feel overwhelming. That's when I decided to change my approach. Instead of watching the whole movie, I focused on specific scenes. I picked short, 5-minute scenes. Some of my favorites came from Harry Potter and Inception. I would watch these scenes repeatedly. Let's take the scene where Hagrid tells Harry he's a wizard. I would watch it with subtitles first, then without subtitles, focusing on the dialogue, the emotion, and the way the characters spoke. I listened carefully to how they emphasized certain words, how they pronounced difficult sounds, and how they used slang, everyday expressions. After watching it a few times, I turned off the subtitles completely and challenged myself to understand what they were saying without any help. Breaking it down into smaller scenes made it easier to digest the language. It felt less overwhelming, and I could study the same scene over and over until I understood it perfectly. Now, here's something important. Repetition is key. Learning English or any language takes time, and it's all about practice. I repeated scenes, movies, and phrases so many times that they became second nature to me. I remember watching Forrest Gump again and again, until I could say, "Life's like a box of chocolates," in Tom Hanks' voice, with the right accent and intonation. The more I repeated, the more natural it felt. Suddenly, English phrases started slipping into my everyday conversations. I'd be talking with friends or writing something down, and I'd remember a phrase I learned from a movie. Repetition is not just about memorizing words. It's about internalizing the rhythm and flow of the language. It's what helps you move from knowing words to actually speaking fluently. As I became more comfortable with English, I set a new challenge for myself watching movies without any subtitles. The first time I did this, I felt nervous. I wasn't sure if I'd understand enough to enjoy the movie. The first film I tried was Inception. It's a complicated movie to follow even if you speak English fluently, but surprisingly, I found that I could follow along. I didn't understand every single word, but I got the gist of the conversations. The context and the way the actors spoke helped me fill in the gaps. It was such a rewarding experience because I realized that I didn't need to understand every word perfectly to enjoy the movie. Over time, I became more confident watching movies without subtitles, and it felt like a huge milestone in my language learning journey. The more I watched movies, the more I realized that learning English wasn't just about the language, it was also about understanding the culture behind it. Movies are a reflection of the societies they come from, and watching them gave me insight into how native speakers think, interact, and express themselves. For example, by watching comedies, I started to understand British humor, which relies heavily on wordplay and sarcasm. American movies, on the other hand, often have a more straightforward, direct style of communication. Watching movies from different English-speaking countries helped me pick up on cultural nuances and slang that you can't learn from textbooks. This cultural immersion was incredibly valuable. It made me feel more connected to the language and helped me understand the subtleties that make English such a rich, expressive language. So, that's my journey of how I learned English by watching movies. It wasn't an easy process, but it was definitely one of the most enjoyable ways to learn. If you want to try this method, remember these key steps. 1. Start with subtitles in your own language, then switch to English subtitles. 2. Rewatch your favorite movies to focus more on the language than the plot. 3. Break down movies into smaller scenes and watch them repeatedly. 4. Challenge yourself by watching without subtitles when you're ready. 5. Engage with the culture behind the movies to better understand the context of what you're learning.